Hello and welcome to the GhostÉire Channel. My name is Anthony Kerrigan, and tonight we are joined by Kev Kerr of Kev Kerr Paranormal. How are you doing, Kev?
I'm good, mate. You?
Oh, good there, Kev. Hope you're keeping well. So, folks, we're going to be talking to Kev about investigative techniques, also psychology, and for the final subject, we're going to be talking about equipment. So, if you have any questions for Kev, feel free to put them forward on this live feed. You can also go to our contact page on our website, www.ghostére.net. Go to the contact page, fill in the blanks. If you have a personal message, just put in brackets personal message or private message, and we'll look at that question for him. Also, if you're affiliated with any paranormal team or tourist attraction, feel free to name the group and the organisation, and we'll give a shout out to you. We're coming live from Facebook, but also our website, www.ghostére.net. On the home page, you'll see the red button, the GhostÉire Channel. Just click on that, and that will bring you to the live feed. And on that page, you can see also what has happened in the past and see what is coming up in the future as well. We also have a competition tonight, folks, where you have opportunity to win cash and prizes around Halloween. To do so, you have to comment on the show. And a few of you already, well, Jonathan has commented there already. Hi, Jonathan. Hope you're keeping well. Jonathan from County Fermanagh. How are you doing, Jonathan? So, yes, Kev, so we'll probably get straight into the first question. We're going to be talking about investigative techniques. Can you tell us what is a paranormal investigation?
A real paranormal investigation would be a search for an answer to what is considered to be anomalous phenomena. So something either to do with ghosts, could be cryptozoological, so looking for Nessie, something where you are trying to find an answer to something that seems to be paranormal activity.
And like for do investigators themselves do you think they do a methodological approach when you do locations, when you do investigations? Do they follow a certain structure properly?
They should. I don't think they do. I think there's just so many different types of investigator. So you've got, the events teams who, they do an investigation, but they bring along the public, and they've got some bleepy flashy, and it becomes a bit more of an entertainment based thing, a kind of need to impress the public kind of aspect, which I wouldn't really consider an investigation. It's more of being in a haunted location, waiting for something to happen, basically, and trying to make even a flashy box try and flash. Then you obviously got a location-based investigation, so usually a team and that kind of thing who would go out to a location, say like Jamaica Inn or Worcester Mansion, and they will set up their kit, and that method can vary massively from someone who goes in and they do it properly and they take their time and they put a lot of time and effort into it and they take a lot of data, to teams with bleepy flashy and equipment and things like that just kind of ask EMF meters to talk to them, that kind of thing. And then you got the residential, like the really in-depth stuff where you're going into somebody's house to investigate, which again changes the methodology completely. So it depends which one you want to talk about as what sort of direction you take with the methods.
Yeah. Well, I was going to probably say that we're going to probably each sort of one there. Should people be aware, I suppose, when like buildings which are abandoned, or insecure, when it comes to fight and flight, the instinctive psychological response, should people be doing abandoned buildings, that and that kind of thing for investigating, if there's always that kind of being on edge kind of thing.
Yeah, so I think that kind of grows from that public aspect of what makes an investigation good. It gives you a buzz, it makes you scared, that kind of thing. And in a lot of um, the abandoned buildings type situation, is you've got that added aspect of being caught.
Mm,
Um, that also aspect kind of comes from a lot of these locations charging more and more and more. So these places are free to go and investigate. But an important part for any investigator is to kind of be really self-aware, understand that they might be going to like hyper arousal where you begin to feel scared and you feel on edge and that kind of thing.
mm,
And the problem with being in an abandoned building, that aspect is already there.
yeah,
Security could turn up, police could turn up, member of the public could be, you know, um, someone on heroin or whatever, just in there,
mm,
shooting up or whatever. So you've
yeah,
already got, without the paranormal aspect, you've already got multiple things that are like, real dangers in that sense,
yes. I
which
suppose with
again,
that.
like, gone.
Sorry, go ahead, Kev. Yeah.
Which that gives you the psychological effect then, and then as we know, if we're in that state and we're not using our prefrontal cortex, front part of the brain, and we're not concentrating properly and we're not really in it,
Mm.
then it's almost pointless trying to do an investigation.
True, yeah, because I noticed it myself that I find it hard to do myself personally, and probably other people that are watching know it themselves as well. When you do an abandoned building, compared, say, you do an abandoned building one day, and then you do a location like a museum, which is cordoned off,
Hmm.
secure, there's nobody around, you've only got a night watchman possibly, or just yourselves. You're changing from being on edge to a place that's secure, and then you might be going the next week to an abandoned building, and you'll notice it yourself, the differences there. And I
Hmm.
suppose, especially, I don't know how it is in England at the moment, but in ourselves, we've had a lot of people. I suppose I mentioned immigration, refugees getting into housing and all that. And if
Hmm.
people are inside buildings prior to the moving in, then that can be
Mm.
seen as kind of trespassing there, and there's a high lot of security there.
Yeah.
I've just got a few shout outs there. Jonathan says, indeed, all. How you doing, Jonathan, again? Karen, how you doing? Karen Besant. I think
There
about the
she is.
parameet. How you doing, Karen? How you doing? I should just mention it. Trespass is a big issue in some areas. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's that's what we're going to talk a bit more on it there. Now we're going to delve more into it. We're going to get the nitty gritty out of it. Kev, is how long should an investigation be, as in terms of time, like prior to an investigation, the actual length of time of the actual being on site, and then afterwards?
So it can depend. So if you're doing a location based, depends which way you think of it. You can either do one night because that's the financial aspect of trying to have it for more
Mm,
is an issue. So you might have it for one night, which means you got to maximize the time you're there. When
mm,
it comes to residential, though, you'll be looking. It could be a week, it could be 6 months, a year. You'll be backwards and forwards and dealing with things. So if you've got that time, then the best. Let's try to work out the way to do it. To be able to name the best amount of time that you need to do an investigation is really, really difficult because it depends
mm,
on if it's residential and something is happening that doesn't seem to be easily resolvable, then you could spend 6, 7 months, 12 months. If you're dealing with aftercare of a client, then you've got longer. Um,
mm,
if you're dealing with just a location, you can extend that as a bit of a case study for as long as you want to, or as long as you have
mm,
access. So if you had a place, I know, I'll go back to like Harry Price, but like with Borley Rectory, he rented it for a year.
mm, mm,
And he basically had a team that lived there for that year, and they all that whole year they were observing everything that was going on. And that's
mm,
a really good way to do it. My Haunted Hotel, obviously 24/7 CCTV, which is fantastic. That's how we should be doing
mm.
it. But the exact length of time required varies completely from how often these things happen to, um, again with the residential, to if that aftercare is required, all that constant communication.
Yes, yeah, it's great. It's interesting that it's. I suppose it depends on, I suppose, how long and length of time you spend on a location as well, and what type of. Would it depend on what kind of experiments, like kind of what kind of research you're doing on this site? Like would
Yeah.
like say spiritual experiences like seances, divination, would that take more
Mhm.
time to evaluate?
Yeah, so you'd set it up. The perfect way to investigate is to create an experiment. So it doesn't matter what method you're using, but you need to be experimenting with it. You need to be planning exactly what you're doing, write that down, and then you need to be looking at the results and then checking that to your hypothesis, to what you said you think is going to happen, and then see what happens, and then you base another experiment based on what happened, and keep going like that. So you can keep doing that over and over and over again as many times as you need to. If you're doing something along the lines of, say, seances, you want to be,
Mm,
we're going to perform a seance at 2, we're going to perform a seance at 5, and then each seance, then we're going to look at the varying difference between doing it at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and 5 o'clock, or whichever that decision would be. So if you are doing a
mm,
seance, you'd also need, again, an observer that was taking notes to saying
mm.
exactly what's happening in that situation.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, because we did a particular location. It was like a wake museum, as we call it. I picked that spot to do like a sort of seance kind of experiment. But I try
Hmm.
to, I know with anything that you can't control, kind of anything to do with the paranormal, put in control, kind of a testing, like, But I tried, instead of the individuals facing in, I had them facing outwards, and they couldn't
Hmm.
communicate with each other. They couldn't look at each other there, and just
Yeah.
measuring temperature and wind flow, because like drafts and all that.
Hmm.
Nothing happened, which is great.
Yeah.
Which is great. There was nobody picked up any drafts or anything. They wrote down their findings, what they found out afterwards, and actually, it was kind of interesting there.
Mm.
Jonathan says, "What would you need for investigating, like insurance? What kind of insurance, and to keep safe end of it, would you need a person qualified for first aid?" That's a good question, Jonathan.
Yeah. So you can actually get paranormal practitioner insurance. So that covers mediums and investigators and that kind of thing, as well as there's also events insurance that you can get for events teams and that kind of side of things. Um, and you can get that, I think, Westminster, I used to go with, I can't remember the new company I'm using. But basically, I think it's like £5 a month or something. It's
Hmm.
just basic insurance, so you can extend that to your equipment and that kind of stuff. So, which obviously costs you more. So that'll cover you insurance based. If you are going in private investigation into residential, then your insurance is much, much more. Um, I used to rely on ASAP, the Association for the Scientific Study of Anomalous Phenomena. They would train you as an investigator, become a member of the NRPI. You'd hold your own insurance, but you could also rely then for advice from them, which protected you again. And then things like first aid. So definitely want to do. Like a basic first aid, someone in the team be a first aider, which is a really good idea. At the same time, it's always good to have someone who's a mental health first aider. And I
Hmm.
think that's the same for events, it's the same for definitely for residential and even for the groups. In the case that there is a psychological issue that arises from what you've been doing, so they can be signposted to like the correct place, basically.
True, true. I just got a few shouts. Karen says, "Hello, are my other profiles working?" Caroline from ASAP, I think, as well. Caroline, good evening, everyone. Um, we also have Karen says, Karen says, Kev groans when we are away investigating. I say the word history. I'll ask you what that's about in a second. Uh, Gareth says, keep it all Westminster insurance, he says, Gareth says.
Yeah.
And nice. Yeah, Karen, yeah, Caroline, ASAP there, totally. Yeah, so I was going to say, like, because I noticed myself now with Arne, as we were probably the cost of getting locations, I'm going to ask you about that as well.
Mm.
Um, we're having to probably go abroad. I say abroad. I'm in Ireland. Go to England
Yeah.
and do an investigation because travel insurance kind of covers on that kind of side, which is kind of handy there.
Yeah.
I think it was Blue Insurance is the company there, White Horse,
Hmm.
and that covers you for a year. I think I don't know, I forget now how much 100 it is, but that's for the year then as well. Um,
Yeah.
but tell us there, Kev. New Age spirituality and investigative techniques. So I'm talking about smudging, cleansing, putting crystals of property. Is it
Hmm.
is it worth? Should it be? Should it happen?
So that kind of molds in for me into the psychological aspect as well. So kind of, um, I have done many moons ago when I was a new investigator, and this individual, there was a lot of very reasonable answers to why things were happening in the house, but they weren't looking for me as an investigator to do that. They wanted me to confirm, and then deal with it. So
Hmm.
I just asked a friend to come and cleanse the house with a sage stick. Um, Said he's a medium. Come in. So it's pretty unethical, but that was back in the early days. Um,
Hmm.
and it worked. It worked an
Yes.
absolute charm. They no longer had any issues or anything else. But my scientific mind, my engineering mindset, that was like, I can see why those creaks are happening at that time. I can see why you might think that you're like something's opening your cupboard doors, but it's very obvious that you're opening and wandering off and that kind of thing. To then go and get them to go and smudge the house, and lo and behold, it didn't happen again. So it's
Yes.
there's that aspect, but also there's that safety aspect to it as well for me, where um, you know the idea of protection, the idea of cleansing, the idea of that. For me, I don't believe in it, but I do understand the power of it. So it's like I really understand
Hmm.
why that happens. I'm not really a religious person. I'm wearing St. Christopher, but like not really a religious person. But I've worn this since I was a kid and never taken it off. It's always been there. I've got this on my wrist. Anything dark to protect me from negative things, and like I say, I don't believe it, but psychologically, it's really good to remain calm
Hmm.
and be like, oh, everything's okay.
Hmm.
That's my
So,
viewpoint on that side of things.
yeah. Would you agree that sort of superstition will have a lot to do with like people's beliefs, superstition? Like how the I'll probably go into that in a bit, but I'll go on to because that's on the next probably topic there. But
Yeah.
say public events. Now we'll talk about public events.
Hmm.
Are are public events classified as investigations?
Not really. The good side of a public event is that they're in that location, which means there's observers in that location. So there is some level of information coming from maybe something that's experienced at that time, which gives a ghost story or something to look at. So that is the advantage of it. And at the same time, the only other advantage is bringing just normal people into the paranormal. That could be the next Harry Price or Steve Parsons, or they become the
Hmm.
next big investigator, and they find a new approach, or they find something that's like viable that we can work with. So it has its place, but as an investigation, it's more of a what's the word? Oh, hey, Cal. Um, as an investigation, it's more of a kind of entertainment value, a little bit different from, not much different from like watching a film, really.
Hmm. And like I suppose yeah, people with public events, they kind of you kind of brings people in, and there's pros and cons to it. Like people get interested,
Hmm.
they sort of join a group or a team. Um, Going on to about probably private cases and probably, as you said, residential cases. Should we be what's the word? Should we be what's the word? Should we be programmed? Not programmed. Should it be regulated? Should we be regulated to
Mm.
go into people's houses? Should
Yes, 100,
do you agree with that?
100%. Yeah. So it's this is the thing with residential. It's quite easy when you first get into the paranormal. There's kind of two levels to it. When you first get into the paranormal, you think that's a normal thing to do. Oh, our Kaz's sister's brother's got a ghost in his house. Oh, cool. I want to see it. I want to go and investigate it. And
Hmm.
your idea of investigation you've seen on the telly, you go to his house. what you don't really take into account is that he's very uncomfortable living there, or there's an issue, either a mental health issue or something with him. So all of a sudden, you'll find yourself in with this bleepy gadget with something that doesn't detect ghosts, but you're basically telling them it does, and then it's flashing because
mm,
it's picking up on all these different things that are quite normal, and then that person's kind of left vulnerable with confirmation that there is a ghost in their house, there is something negative there, or whatever they say. It could be, an inexperienced medium might go in there and say, "Yeah, I can sense this really negative energy," and then bye, and then leave them to it, and that
mm,
that's one end of the spectrum. The other end is gaining confidence that you know how to use an EMF meter, and you know how to do you know how to perform a séance, and you know how to open a circle and all this kind of stuff, and you're going to go in there and you're going to resolve the issue for him,
mm,
but you forget about the individual again. The
mm,
person who has to live there, whether that person could be just genuinely interested, and some people are, oh, that was really cool, and then they can just forget about it. But some people are more
mm,
vulnerable, especially if they lived with it for a while and they're still uncomfortable, and they'll be worried about that kind of getting worse. And I think as an investigator, when we go in and do those things, we should be looking for the actual answers to what's happening and trying to help the individual. So a focus is on the client. Your focus is, are they okay? For one, you can
mm,
see they're deeply disturbed by the situation. They might be experiencing something that is, you know, absolutely horrendous. I've dealt with a case where someone thought they're being raped each night by a demon, and they were experiencing that and feeling that. Everything else, as far as they're concerned, that
mm,
was their reality. Which, as you can imagine, no matter if it's real or not, is horrid. Um,
mm,
but if I was an inexperienced investigator, or a team, and I'll go in, yeah, oh god, yeah, definitely it's there, and bolster that psychologically for that person, you're doing a
mm,
lot more damage than good. Um,
mm,
so residential, I always say, go through ASAP, join the
mm,
SPR, understand the effects that your actions have to that individual, and even slightly to location owners.
mm,
Think about that when you go to a location. Is it
mm,
a stately home that's been open to the public for investigation? Then the person who's walking you around might actually live there, or there might be a caretaker, that kind of thing. And by explaining what you're doing or what you're trying to achieve and what you found, you can make it a lot better for them. So for
mm,
me, with residential, you don't mess around with it. You have to really mean business. The reason I don't put out videos on residential investigation is because I don't want people watching that video and going, okay, that's yeah, I'll just go and do that, and then they run in, because there's a whole
mm,
spectrum of things you have to learn before you can do it. And again, with ASAP,
mm,
what's really good is you can actually learn about confidentiality. You can learn about, note taking and interviewing. You can learn about psychological aspects. All of these through, I think it's two. Caroline will probably say in the chat. I think it's two courses, and basically there's like the beginners and then like a intermediate type level, and through that you can learn how to deal with these residential cases, and you can learn about
mm,
ethics, and you can realize what damage you're capable of, which is, we are capable of so much damage, ridiculous amounts.
mm. Yeah, that's great. It's great advice there. And I've just got to go through a few more shout outs. Andy Linden says hi. How's it going? And I think he's talking to Cal. How you
All right,
doing,
bud.
Professor Cal? How you doing? Uh, Caroline says hi, Cal. And Gareth and Carl promoting a book. This is cool. Phone calls from the dead. Karen says, agree with you, Kev. Going to people's home with no safeguarding controls, etc., is a big no-no. There are too many horror stories of teams saying demons are there, etc. We're going to talk about a bit more of that because it's on to the next subject, which will be psychology. Um, Caroline says working with clients in private
Mm,
cases needs to have a good grounding or ethics training. Work in private cases is more like social work, looking after the home owners,
yeah,
safeguarding,
perfect.
etc. Trevor says hi all. So yeah, with that would probably I think that's probably the last probably question there, but it'll probably expand into the next topic, which is going to be
Hmm.
psychology there.
Yeah.
So, folks, I got a little jar there. You've all been commenting, so it's like a cookie jar. So I'm going to pick out um, three people to go have a chance to win cash tonight, or put your name into a Halloween mega draw. And Cal, Professor Cal, you're up there. So you got to stay on near the end there, Cal. Unfortunately, I know most of you are here for the competition and Kev, not me. I just pick out another name in case Cal gets bored. Jonathan Watson. And I'll just pick out one more in case everybody starts going away. And who do we have? Cancel. Who do I have? One more. Oh no! Oh yeah, press that one. Karen, you're in with a chance as well. That's if you can get the other two off off the line.
She'll work out a way, I'm sure.
I mean, nothing else. Okay, so the next topic we're going to talk about. I'll close it now. Finish it off now. We're talking about psychology,
Hmm.
and so the first question about this there, Kev, is: can the natural environment fool people into experiencing paranormal phenomena? So, can the natural environment, the
100%.
natural,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So when I do my workshop, a big part of what that workshop is learning about your surroundings. There's the psychological aspect, so internally what's going on for you, as well as externally what the place is like. So whether it's as easy as looking at the heating elements, the lights, the way the shadows drop, as you're walking around, and understanding your environment as much as possible. And the other
mm,
part is the um, looking at the emotional awareness of yourself, where you're at, that kind of thing. Because if you're going in stressed, you know, you're you're not paying attention to what's going on around you. You're more worried about things that are going on in your head. I say the same with belief; it needs to be kind of left at the door. And sometimes we got one of the you got one of the biggest problems, which is you're taking belief, you're taking all your stresses, you're taking them all into an investigative arena, and
mm,
they're just blurring your perception of what's happening. They're causing all kinds of issues for you. You can drop into hyperarousal really quickly, which again, you stop thinking properly or thinking soundly. So you become a really terrible witness, as it's going on. So if you, as an investigator, the most important part is really understanding your surroundings, where you are, looking at um, where that heating system is, how the room's built. Is it big and open and airy? Is it covered in? I On Monday I popped into the Haunted Antiques Research Centre, and there's obviously all these haunted antiques and things. How
mm,
is that affecting you? As you walk
mm,
in, and always being continuously aware of it as much as possible.
I come to questions there, Justin, in a minute there. Like you just reminded me there. I mentioned the Wake Museum again in Waterford, but people are sensing unease in the room, and there's like display cabinets, reflections. When people peering in, they're seeing people behind them. So whether it's a
Hmm.
trick of the eye, like the eyes are trying to focus in on one
Hmm.
thing, and it's a psychological factor that their minds are trying to read the notice board, and then the light's reflecting back, so that the
Hmm.
brain's trying to deal with those two couple of things. But also in that room, I noticed there's a lot of portraits, old
Yeah.
portraits of faces. So whether that is an element that somebody's watching you because they have that feeling
Hmm.
as well. These little things, I suppose, have a little kind of effect, do they?
Well, when we look at faces are
Hmm.
one of the most important things for our survival. When we look at pareidolia and that aspect where, we will put an emotion to a face, and being able to see a face is one of the really important parts of the brain that says that is an enemy, or that is someone with a big smile on their face and they're here to give me a big cuddle and everything's okay, or that's someone, teeth glaring. And in the dark, we already kind of, our senses are heightened to that point, and we're trying to pick up and place those faces a bit like a Kinect camera in a way.
Hmm.
That's like a really simple way to put it,
But
like a
better,
bit like a, but much
but
better,
better,
yeah.
much
But
better. So,
but the problem is perception of the result. So like
hmm,
there's the old thing where you'd have like your coat on a chair in the corner of your bedroom,
hmm,
and you'd wake up and you'd be looking, and it's quite dark, and it looks like a figure stood there, and you turn on the light and it's just your coat on the chair. But your brain's
mm,
going, it's going to hurt us if it is a figure, so we're going to think about that first. We're going to, like, that's going to be our amygdala kicks in and says, yep, we've got to be aware that's a danger. And
mm,
that's what we got to take into account when we do this investigation, when we switch the lights off, especially, and then we begin to go into that hyper arousal because we can't see, our senses are cut off, and then
mm,
slowly, the light comes in, and then all of a sudden, okay, right, I've got a general vision of what's going on. Then we start looking
mm,
for shapes, and if you've got those pictures on the wall of all these different faces, your brain, no matter which way you're looking, is going to be like twigging every single one of those faces and reading them for emotion and what's going to happen next.
mm. I'm going to come to the questions before we move on there. So Justin said earlier there, good evening, Kev and Anthony. Hi, Justin. What is having the biggest impact, positive, negative, on paranormal investigation?
Um, Media, I think. Um, when we look at these TV shows where we look at, Ghost Adventures and Ghost Hunters and all that kind of stuff, I think that's the biggest impact. That drives people's interest forward as much as possible. Um, but it also drives a lot of people who think that is exactly how it's done. And the same as I find when people find out I'm a paranormal investigator, they're like, oh yeah, instantly think IR cameras and screaming in the dark. And then it's like, no, 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 wait. I'm not that type of investigator. That's kind of what you might see on telly or you might see on YouTube because that's what the public perceive and they want to see it. So that
Mm,
media side, it really pushes sort of a wave of popularity coming through, um, which again is a negative or a positive. Um, and I hope, in the future as the popularity dies down a bit, and less
mm,
people who are trying to monetize, less people who are trying to, more people who are trying to look for the truth aspect of it, and it's a bit of a passion, then I think we'll go through sort of over the next decade a kind of decline of the popularity, which will then kind of give us a few more results without it being clouded over.
mm. Yeah, it's interesting there because we're talking about. I don't know, like people say, residential cases there. Like,
Mm,
are people not calling out paranormal groups because they've actually got the capability because they think seeing YouTube, seeing the TV that they can do it themselves. The apps are cheaper. They can get the apps. There's
mm,
less faith in religion. So
yeah.
do you reckon that's another factor that probably people are doing it themselves?
So I've dealt with a few cases that have involved. So we got a Ouija board. That's a usual one, and then we get this idea again from media that we look at The Exorcist and the popularity of the Ouija board then, or ghost apps. So what was it? The Ghost Radar, and they put it on, and then all of a sudden it blips up. There's a ghost nearby, and that psychologically creates a big issue that grows and grows and
Mm,
grows, and then everything in the house becomes almost a paranormal thing. And it's very easy. You could get a cheap fake version of a K2 for like £10 on eBay, or any kind of EMF meter for like 10, £15. They'll see an EMF
mm,
meter on, think, oh, that's an EMF meter, and I'll and oh, it's flashing. They don't realize that their Wi-Fi, their plug sockets, do they? Like, terrestrial TV, like all that kind of stuff is affecting it. They just see
mm.
flashes of lights. TV's told me flashy light means ghost, and then it just blows up massively.
I'm going to ask you that question when we come to equipment there, the next topic there, next
Mhm.
segment, because I'm going to ask you, is Timu a good thing putting ghost hunting equipment groups out of business? But I'll ask you that later because it might be good. Timu could be the savior of paranormal investigating. Tara says our brains like to see something familiar. That'd
Mhm,
be true. Going back to pareidolia and seeing the face there, or trying to recognize a pattern. The brain
mhm.
always looks for patterns. That's exactly Caroline. Justin says, if objects can be haunted, why aren't antique shops the most haunted places in the country? Good question.
Exactly, and it's one of those things that I suppose I'm just trying to think about it in every possible way. So one could be that, say, the generic aspect of a person who runs an antique shop doesn't necessarily believe in the paranormal. It could also be I think because there's a few museums that report a lot of paranormal activity. I can't name the amount of museums, but that idea. But I think that comes down to belief and maybe status in a way. Um,
Hmm.
but I imagine if you put a shout out into the public and said, anyone who owns an antique shop, have you ever experienced paranormal activity? It's probably a good little research point to look at and say, well, how come with all these old objects they're not, or they are? I don't know. Um, but I can imagine if you did put it out to public questioning, you'd probably find quite a few that does. Or it might just be the fact that they might not believe in it, or
Hmm.
it makes
Yeah,
them uncomfortable to believe in it, so they just ignore and keep going.
yeah, we did recently a psychometry test in Back to the Wake Museum again. Sorry, in Waterford, we did a psychometry test, so testing inanimate objects by using this the sense
Mm,
of touch. And what we found out, like, is we got a piece of clay pot, and it was from the 1100s,
mhm,
and I asked three questions, and I asked for the origin, where it was made, and what was it? Because it was a fragment. It wasn't anything.
mhm.
It wasn't any shape of anything. It was a wine jug anyway. But they were all kind of right in a way. They were all gave modern sort of dates post. It was supposedly
Yeah.
created wine jug, and they were all accurate because I couldn't. Whatever I was going to do with the questions, whatever I was doing in the test, I would never actually find the exact date. They could be all right. They could be getting any energy, supposedly
Hmm.
with psychometry. Spiritualists would believe that you can pick
Yep.
at any point throughout that
Hmm.
history. So the last 800
Yep.
years, they were right. The lads,
Could be
the
come
three
up with anything.
subjects that were doing it. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it was a useless test they did, but it's worth
But
doing it. You know,
but this is it.
I yeah.
You could get replicas and try the same, and you can try and you know. But then at the same time, as I've always found with all them kind of aspects, is so you look at, say, pottery. Okay, right. Trying to think. That could be that could come from a drainage pipe. That could come from a chimney. That could come from a
Mm,
tile. That could come from like something that's been buried in the ground thing. But we're also doing a test where it needs to go by history, so I might want to go further back. So it's that
mm,
thought process that goes
mm,
into whether or not that object, is from that time. And then by the
mm,
time you've gone back through all that situation, looked at your current scenario, where you might have got the object from, how that test might be going, you can go kind of pinpoint, within a century, like,
mm,
I think it's going to be there, and then have your best shot,
mm,
and then again, as you say, is that idea where it goes, oh, well, there's just too much information there,
mm.
or
Yes, it is.
it,
Yeah.
go back 30 years just to be safe,
Mm,
and then you're like, it was used by someone, or it's held by this person, or, you know, it's kind of that in between biggest vast amount of area possible, and then kind of shoot your
mm.
shot as best you can.
That's a
And the
good point.
experiments,
Yeah,
that's the way to try and do it. Shrink that down. Get
yeah.
something that was literally handmade yesterday. I did
Yeah.
a out of body experience experiment with Sam Treasure, and that's what she studies. So it's like brilliant. So her part of the investigation was to sleep. That was it, which was must have been lovely for her. And we had
Mm,
multiple rooms in this building, and she went into sleep. We chose a random room, put a bucket down, put an object on top of it, locked the door, only key for the door, camera on the object, and then that was our investigation for 2 nights.
mm,
Um,
mm,
and then she would, have an out of body experience or astral project, and then she had to tell us what that was. The windows were
mm,
covered. There was no access into their entire weekend, and it was an object that was so far from anything. It was a Constantine lighter, like
all
Zippo
right.
lighter. It was custom made, so I had it
Mm,
custom built, and it was like, put that on there. She'd never ever seen it. I knew she'd probably never even seen anything like it,
mm,
and she, unfortunately, she couldn't get it, but she got very close.
mm.
um but it just wasn't close enough for
Yeah.
me.
It's hard to, it's a hard experiment like doing that, yeah. And not in that way, because I'm
Mm.
thinking what are the components of the object then as well? Where was that made? Like fuel, light fuel, or the metal? Then It's so
Yeah.
it's hard. Carl says, Justin Carwell, good point. I always like the fact that statistically you're more likely to see a ghost on a ghost train than any other fairground attraction. But why haunt the train? It's a good point there.
Exactly. And that psychological aspect of what you're going in and expecting. And as I say about that, leave your beliefs at the door, leave all that, say it, prejudice, is not the right word. Um, leave all that out the door. Have to investigate as best you can. I'm not saying that's an easy thing to do. It takes a lot of
Mm,
practice, but a constant self-awareness throughout the investigation to kind of keep yourself level.
mm.
Because if you go into a haunted location, you'll never guess what you're looking for. Subconsciously, if
No.
anything.
True, and that's the thing as well. It's I suppose that's another good question. I'll probably put again there. Oh God, there's so many questions to put forward to you. Caroline says, "When I die, I'm hanging around at an old book or table that I've had for 20 years. I'm going to sit on that bed of my pals, eating crisps loudly at 3 a.m. Now we could do a psychometry test with crisps, and we'll see if they are." They might be all rotten by the time another 50, 100 years, but anyway, we'll see about that, Caroline. There, Carol says one of my PH students has taken on my project as Psy experiences in the funeral industry. Oh,
Oh, amazing.
that's interesting. Going back to the White Museum, so it took a while to get ethics approved, but the survey coming out in the next few days. Oh, that's great, Carol. There,
Amazing.
uh, it'd be great to see what is it, Psy experiences in the funeral industry. Yeah, because we're going to touch upon that. That's what I'm going to quickly,
Hmm.
swiftly go on to. Do spirits have a psychological values as well? Do they have like characteristics, emotional side?
Um, so I'm saying yeah, in the sense of if they do exist in what we feel is like is a person who's moved on. Obviously, you got the idea of stone tape theory, but with an intelligent haunting,
Hmm.
that's what we perceive
Survival.
is that they've got some level of intelligence there, which says they must have some kind of emotion there. And when you look at, say, Enfield, is kind of this idea of like this angry old man who's, that they've always got like an emotional bandwidth of some kind. And when we look at the spiritual aspect from mediums, they always say they're like really upset or they're really thing. Don't Scare Claire did a talk about um, different types of ghosts, like the colours, as in the white, the grey lady, the red lady, the blue
Hmm.
meaning like sorrow, and the red meaning like anger and passion, and that
Hmm.
kind of aspect. So I think we connect, regardless if it's real or not. If it's real, then I would say yes. There is an emotional attachment, but at the same time, if it's not real, I also think because we experience something, then there's emotion attached to it, regardless. So even if it's the projection of something that we're doing, that emotion I think can be projected.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like, as you said, was it Caroline? You said mentioned coloured ghosts. Is that Caroline? Did you? Caroline might mention color. Well, it was like as you said, like
Mm.
different colors have a different. We see different colors during the day. Like light blue is meant to reflect calm. That's why nurses wear
Hmm.
light blue. It's to calm us down. Red is to make
Yeah.
us alert. When we see
Hmm.
red, that's why it's on the traffic lights and all that. Danger signs. How colors have a different effect.
Hmm.
And we've got probably this question. One of these I'm going to put forward to you there, Kev. Um, so it's personally, do you know any? This is a bit weird. I don't want to put that there. This is going back to private cases, residential
Hmm.
cases. Do you know any like paranormal investigators, the psychology of them that deliberately? Do you know of any groups or people? Now you could just give us a little hint that personally look for private residential places, for private cases, people that have problems to investigate. They're just looking for them.
So, how do you mean? Do you mean groups that are doing it
As
and
in,
shouldn't
as in
be,
just
or
as yes, as groups and that, just to be big-headed and just to say like up
yeah,
on social media,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah?
I know,
And there's, I'd say not to name any names, but there are quite a few groups like that. There's a mixture. There's those who do it because they think it's the right thing,
mm,
And there's those who do it for popularity, and they like to broadcast that on social media and be like, we're dealing with this private it drives me crazy when I see it, but
mm,
dealing with a private residential case, we've got blah blah blah, like name in this place in Leicester, and you're like, are you for real?
mm,
Or they're approaching news outlets while they're doing this
mm,
investigation to do their little, look at us, we're
yes,
investigators thing,
yeah,
um and basically making things worse, and things like oh, my house is haunted and that kind of thing. That it worries me what direction that's going and what that's
mm,
teaching the general public about investigation and stuff. So it's like,
mm,
unfortunately, yes, they do. Um, but then I also think one of the downsides of ASAP is their failure to modernize to reach these people before they actually become that.
mm,
Try educate as much as possible and put out to the world that if you're doing residential cases, there's a standard you need to be at, not
mm,
oh, I understand equipment, so I'm going in. Like, there is a standard you need to
mm.
be at. Um, you'll never
But
stop it
but that
completely,
would
that's for
that
sure.
but would that be the fault of authorities that are over ASAP? I would like to say governing parties like councils, but even government, those are government laws and all that.
Mm.
Is it only a matter of time that somebody calls to a case and actually they're not paranormal investigators, they're actually there to rob an
It's
old woman or cause a murder and all that,
yeah,
homicide,
I
felony?
I think I think we're not bad enough. As in, like,
Mm,
the paranormal to the majority of the public is quite farcical. It's, oh, you look for ghosts, ooh, spooky, and it's like there's that kind of identity to it, and that works at the upper echelons as well, in the government and things. They don't realize how quickly these things can go wrong. Frazzles. You crunching away on, but like they don't realize how quickly these things can go wrong, and until they really go wrong. um and I think when people look into the causes of what may say someone commit suicide, or drop into a massive depression, or run screaming from their house to never return and go in financial difficulty, until that happens and the blame is pointed, not that, oh, their house was haunted and they left, because you rarely hear about the team that went in. You'd hear a team went in, but you won't hear who it was. um,
mm,
but that's kind of the hope now, that actually people begin, um, these people are putting it up on social media and bigging themselves up and everything else, and then you've got like
mm,
debunkers that are looking at it going, what, you know
yes,
and calling them out. Then
yes.
you don't realize that damage until then, and then that'll grow in, and people will really begin to see, and then if you're lucky, the government will go, what are these idiots doing? And more likely they'll just
Mm.
try and shut it down completely than they would trying to control it in any way. So
I'm just going to come to a few comments there because we just done this. Tara, Trevor, and Tara, what about cupboards? Caroline says, just for you, I oblige. Along with the auditory phenomena, I bring the olfactory phenomena too. That all smells good. Uh, which is that's a very interesting thing, though, the olfactory kind of sense. Very,
mm.
not me, sorry. Okay. Red was used in the Geinsfeld as it was seen as more common than blue. Oh, right, yeah, I suppose it's like,
Mm.
yeah, it is interesting that the Gainesville, I would like red, I would assume would be like alert. And like working with red, I don't know, probably you could comment there, Cal and Kev there, red would be used in photographic kind of red rooms or dark rooms, as it were called there. And I remember my mother in law saying that she used to work in a photographic kind of dark
Mm.
room there. And they could only spend a certain length of time in that room before they go totally, it sort of triggered them to go a bit warpy
Yeah,
or off. Sorry, pardon the pun, off their head.
yeah,
Um, Caroline says ambulance chasing. Um,
it's
yeah, I've
the
got coming to a few
residential
more
ones
of the
here.
comments there. Yeah, the PhD work on Dylan Jones, Dylan's great, has been looking at the sociology and social media ghost hunters. Really interesting work. Robert Gordon University. Yeah, Dylan is great. I like the way he does views how it's probably Ghostbusters is probably one of the main influences as
Hmm.
well back in the past. Emily says, evening, evening all.
There's
Caroline
Emily.
says, I took part in a survey when it has first brought out about a year ago. It's a great choice of subject. I'm going to ask you this there. Sorry, now I'll come down more to your questions. There's a good few statements there. Kev, should people be investigating, go back to probably psychology investigating techniques, should
Hmm.
people be looking more into psi experiments when they're investigating instead of survival ghosts?
Well, I think it's a good question, because I think that just comes down to your personal aspect, that you what you want to look into, or what you feel. If you think to yourself, I think the ghosts are dead people. If you were thinking logically, you say, right, okay, how do I conduct experiments based on that? Um, I would definitely, if you wanted to go down the route of psi and that psi phenomena, is get into parapsychology and learn those experimental methods. And because even at a basic level, if you get those experimental methods right, you've got half a chance of showing something or proving something, or speaking to the academics and saying, I found this, is this like a correlation or not? um,
Hmm.
but I think it comes down to like personal preference. For me, I don't kind of have a belief of what spirits are, whether they're a projection from our own brains, whether they're like a actual just something that's going on in our brain, whether they are something physical that appears and something within physics we don't understand. I don't really have like a preference, so I just kind of go,
Hmm.
like at the moment, poltergeist is a big thing for me because of something I experienced. So I was like, okay, so I've started building with Andy Guy from Skyer Tech,
Hmm. And
you
yeah.
know, building something to measure wraps and kind of look at the
Hmm.
vibration of the wraps, and over several points at once, and correlating that data live so we can watch what happens. So it's
Hmm.
like, yeah, I think, you can study psi and you can look at
Hmm.
that aspect and go, okay, or you could you could ask the question and then think of what experiments you can conduct to kind of get you closer to that answer. I think the important
Hmm.
part is actually, what's the way to describe it? It's actually, the important part is when you don't get the answer you want, it's still an answer, and then move from
Hmm.
that. And I think what we
Hmm.
really try to do as investigators and academics, and academics think investigators should be here, and investigators are like, well, I am, but they're not. They're here, and it's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's that kind
Yeah.
of you know, like with Cal, Cal's brilliant. We can talk and discuss anything. I'd message him later and say, Carl, is there any chance you can help me out with this experiment? What am I doing wrong? And he's most likely either going to go,
Hmm.
no, I'm busy, or actually, you need to do this, or this. Um,
Hmm.
but as investigators, we separate ourselves a lot. And
Yes.
what we
Yes.
actually need to be doing is kind of staying where we are and learning what we
Hmm.
can, and either bringing
Hmm.
ourselves to that level or saying, okay, I've got to do an experiment. And um, it didn't conform to my belief, but that's okay, because that's the answer. And actually, my belief will change based on what I find. So,
Hmm.
someone who's been doing this 10 years shouldn't have the same mindset as someone, same mindset they had 10 years before. They should have learned massive amounts in that time and changed their belief system multiple times. And when I finally get around to building my website, everything I did for Power Rationalize and GPR and all that is going to be in there. And it's going to be under archive to show that evolution of the really heavy, hardcore skeptic, believer, all that kind of stuff, to show that change. And I think it's really important that people focus on what they have a passion for, but focus on it without a bias of what it should be, and actually try and find out
Hmm.
what it is. And the more we do that, the better we'll be in the paranormal.
Yeah. Yeah. So as we just touched upon a bit earlier, media, to have that aspect, like people, paranormal investigators, they find like this sort of picture, the audio, rare, probably visual. and they go straight to the media with it when they should be going to places like SPR or going to academics and getting their
Hmm.
answers. Or if it's visual, go to Kodak. If it's audio, go to Philips or that. If it's the Connect, you go to Windows, Microsoft. Okay. Carl
Quick chat
says,
with
thank
Xbox.
you, thank you. Thank you, yeah, Xbox. Thank you for doing it.
It's so amazing.
Bro Perkins, keep up the great streams, guys. Psychic, bro. Sorry if I've pronounced that wrong there. Carl, Carl Cooper welcomes. Lorraine says, great chat. Trevor says, hi, Louise.
And she is.
Uh, and sorry if I missed a few of you out there. Carl says, Psi is the blanket term for, yes, ESP,
Mhm.
PK, and survival there as well. Psychokinesis, yeah. Emily Nicholson, that sounds interesting, Kev. Carl says, sounds like, where we go? Where's that one? Sounds like gaining a reputation for saying I'm busy. Okay. What I was going to say, yes, so we've got to touch on time is flown there. It's great subjects there,
Mm.
folks. There, I was going to say, like we did an experiment with the Myers Briggs. There, it's like different
Mm.
emotions, the 16 different emotions to a person there,
Yeah.
and we did that with a glass, and we tried to determine what 60 questions, and we had like disagree, mildly disagree. Mildly agree, totally
Hmm.
agree, something like that, And the glass, we put
Yeah.
our fingers on the glass and asked. After the 60
You,
questions, we got one
you,
of the
you Myers-Briggs the ghost.
personalities.
Yeah.
Yeah, we managed to get a personality out of just one personality out of the 16 of this spirit. I know it's
Mm.
just a random test we did there. Caroline says, Cal
Yep.
Cooper, yeah. So I think I'm up to date with the questions, and we're going to go on to the next subject, which is going to be about equipment, which is going to be interesting.
Mm.
I'll say, Cal, I need you to do a thing for me. Professor Cal, if you're there, if not, you could get me on the phone afterwards or when I pass away. So I'm
He'll,
only joking, that's
he'll
a
be
joke.
busy.
So, I need you to pick a number between 1 and 4, Cal, a number between 5 and 8, and a number between 9 and 12. So a number between 1 and 4, a number between 5 and 8, and a number between 9 and 12. If you can just quickly comment those, I'll give you a few seconds. If not, you could pass it on to Jonathan Watson, who might be still watching. But if you're in there, Cal, you have a chance to enter your name into a Halloween mega draw and win some cash. So you just need to comment between 1 and
4,
4,
yeah.
5
3.
or 8. Okay, here we go. So we got 3. Okay, perfect. Just a number between 5 and 8, 6. Okay, and last one between 9 and 12. 12. All right. No, so at the end of the show, we'll see if you might enter Kev into a draw as well, Cal. So we see with the competition later on.
Yeah,
Okay,
why not?
so we got to touch. We got to touch. Yeah, you never know. He might put Cal in his name, and he might put Kev's name in 3 times. We'll see later on. Anyway, what the story is with that competition. So we're talking about equipment, and the first thing I'm going to ask you there, Kev, is what did paranormal investigators use in the past? So we're talking about what was used in the past to investigate.
Um, Anything available. So it was a lot more basic, So if we look back even sort of early 19th century and look at Harry Price and that kind of aspect, yes, you had cameras, but it wasn't like nowadays where you just press the button and off you go. It was something massive you had to set up. So they'd also use things like talc powder on the floor, that kind of idea, or chalk powder
Hmm.
to look for footsteps and look for. A lot of the time, they were looking for physical trickery over anything spiritual, like spiritual related in
Hmm.
that sense. Um, so they would do things like seal doors and windows. Use plaster to seal and create like a controlled environment. Harry Price would do it, especially. Um,
Hmm.
they'd use things to check vibration, which at the time was mercury in a bowl, and then you can see
Hmm.
obviously the vibration through the mercury. Um, Nowadays we use how have I forgot the word for? check the
You know what I
vibration, and
mean?
that's
It's
all I've been looking at
well,
on the Eddy meter,
yeah,
geophone type stuff.
geophone, yeah, kind of
Yeah,
geophone or a spirit level or something like. But that's the
exactly.
gradients are, yeah, yeah.
Mm. And weirdly, like the same way we kind of do now with a pen, they chalk around objects, see if they move, all that kind of basic aspect. But a lot of it, um, enter, yeah, Cal's totally confused. Um, so yeah, basically they would use a lot of the similar methods that we'd use today. They just did it in a very basic way. Um, you know, you're able to perform the same things, but now we've got it in a box, and it's compact into a small little
Mm,
thing. And we've got cameras, we've got videos, we can do all of that with relative ease. Um, I know, like, Harry Price used to use the remote shutter flashes for his, like, any motion or anything else he might sense as well. There was one, so like now we use motion sensors, but Harry Price used to use, like, when he did mediumship kind of debunking, he would use like gloves and like a made electronic circuit basically, and if that
mm,
circuit was broken, then it would alarm. So it meant if they move, so the medium moves from his position, as in he goes around being grabbing people's ears or whatever trick he wanted to perform, it would alarm. So then when they'd know when the medium moved. So it's the same as what we use, really similar to what we use now, um, but very basic and very simple, and just with the tools that were required then. The single most important thing, which they used to use a lot more than people use nowadays, is the notepad and pen. And
mm,
you
yeah.
know, I still use it on all the time. It's still my favorite tool of all. Um,
Mm.
but the main thing was, notepad and pen.
True. I'm just going to touch upon. Do you reckon many paranormal investigators base test anymore and
So
taste
I
test
think
afterwards?
some do. There's no doubt about it. But what probably more recently is they can kind of data log at the same time, so they don't need to base test. They can just, for me, if you're base testing EMF, there's not really much point to it. Temperature, yes, you probably can get a good idea of what's going on in the room, but again, if you do it at say 7, and you'll have to do that test again at 7:15. Someone will have to be manning that, I think. Or,
Mm,
as we now have modern technology, data log,
mm,
constant, every nowadays probably every second if you wanted it, But just that constant log of temperature all the way through, constant log of EMF if you want to do it. If you think, okay, let's try, and if that's part of your experiment of what you're trying to achieve, then go for it. But
mm,
if your team are there, you need data, you know.
mm,
But I think randomly just gaining data from all different humidity, temperature, if they're all
mm,
lumen, whatever you want to
mm,
measure. Um, Nowadays you'll be kind of stupid to try and do all of that. You're not
mm.
really going to
Oh,
you're going to
thank
gain
you.
loads of data. Yeah, no, but like
I
I,
enjoy
I
it.
think I think like if you had data loggers, happy days, you can
Mm,
pull a relatively good blanket of information from each one, and you're not going to
mm,
spend hours upon hours upon hours.
mm,
The thing with the old way of doing things, it was about observing it and logging what's going on. But it's kind of a being able to data log and build that data is great, but why are you getting that data? So you need to
mm,
make an experiment. So it'll basically be I'm experiment with the idea that ghosts or whatever it is, or it's been reported to you that this kind of you'll be stood doing something and all of a sudden you get this cold draft come through. You say, okay,
mm,
now we need to be looking at temperature. We might need the
mm,
FLIR cam, and we're going to set up an experiment to see. We think it's a draft from the door. Okay,
mm,
so now that's where we need to focus our experiment. We're going to check all the basics. Is it a good seal? Yada, yada, yada. But you might want to see what wind direction, is going on. So you'd be looking at the weather conditions and that kind of stuff. So you'd build a kind
mm.
of a thing around the phenomena that's experienced, not a kind of throw everything at it and see what sticks. Because you put just too much
True.
effort into nothing, and then you'll probably spend the next 4 weeks looking through data, looking through photographs and video that you set up 4 static cameras and so on for one
Mm.
location and one night, which isn't necessarily enough.
Yeah.
If anyone turns around to me and says 4 months ago we were in Woodchester Mansion and we caught this on film, and then they say we
Mm.
caught it last week when we finally got the review and the footage, and if it's not really substantial, that it's like a person walking through that just disappears or something like that, I'm going
Mm.
to say, well, you've left it way too long and you've got no other information to show. What you haven't written anything down to say. Really weird at that exact time. We had a cold spot or someone witnessed it. So, yeah, there's my
Mm.
rant.
It's it's no, it's interesting. Yeah, it's great what you're saying, and it's, I suppose the only problem is, I suppose, with humans, if we're analysing or going into properties, we're contaminated the space anyway. You know, it's a
Yep.
space that is haunted, and our intervention and on the exterior
Hmm.
of the building, there's contamination everywhere. So we can never,
Yep.
I suppose, precisely judge a spontaneous kind of case occurring there.
Hmm.
Um, uh, Jonathan says, "What about EVPs?"
So again, that's like for people getting EVPs for evidence to show people that ghosts are real, or they're, you know, out there just try to collect evidence on ghosts through recorders. Their experiments should be based on the recorder, not chucked into a room. Oh, chuck it down on that table, and then we're off we go. And then 12 hours later, we'll come back for it. And then I'm going to sit there for 12 hours listening. Didn't have a clue what was going on in the room at the time. Didn't have a clue how much sound was coming through that wall, what it sounded like when people walked past the room, all of that. And then suddenly I'm going to turn around and say that noise was a spirit or a ghost or someone talking. Um,
Mm.
for me, if I do it, I don't tend to do it because it's quite a hard one to control. It's
Mm.
like Steve Parsons always
Yeah.
says, put it on a sponge.
Mm.
Chuck the recorder down on the sponge. I personally would do it for about a minute, and I'd
Mm.
ask 5 set questions, and
Mm.
I'll be in that environment at the time. And while those questions are being asked, I would like someone with me who is aware of stomach grumbles, who is aware of creaky noises or something that might happen in the environment while I'm asking the questions, might be aware of
Mm.
someone using pacifying behavior and moving or doing something. So
True.
make the room concentrate for that minute. So we all know these different things. And then when we listen through and it goes, or whatever noise it makes, they say, yeah, that was when you moved back on your chair. Think, okay, cool.
Mm.
Like we got nothing. And just do it in a steady, gradual way like that. Then
Mm.
okay, do EVPs. But for me, there's some incredible EVPs out there. But again, without that visual aspect and the proof that nothing was going on at the time, even because everyone forgets notepad and pen, where they can write these things
Mm.
down. Once you've done your minutes, stop. You write down that you heard the chair move, blah 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 blah. And use a timer. Look on your thing. You got 1 minute. Okay. You don't have to write while the EVP is recording, but you can certainly,
Mm.
within 60 seconds, you can say 20 seconds that happened, 30 seconds that happened, and then quickly write it down.
Mm.
Multiple, it needs to be controlled well.
Yes.
And
Yes.
unfortunately, the majority of investigators really don't do it very well. And they really don't
Mm.
understand subconsciously they're moving. They go,
Yeah.
these little things that we do without our brain's not even aware. Ensure
Mm.
everyone's aware. Right, 60 seconds. I just need all your attention for 60 seconds. Let's do it. That sort of
Mm.
aspect.
Yes, it's great what you're explaining there. And as you said, you mentioned the questions there. We personally ourselves, we have a set questions of 10 questions. We have one person asking that question precisely to the words, and without the silence in between. Give it a minute, so
Mm-hmm.
that we've got that minute, see what's around, get settled. And as you mentioned, a visual kind of aspect, we do need like video cameras just to see what's around, because you do
Yeah.
notice those little kind of itches or scratches or
Mm-hmm.
nasal kind of wheezes,
Yeah.
those kind of things there. Caroline says we take all environmental readings data prior to private cases, then data log throughout. Uh, Jonathan says that's great, thanks. Yeah, so should paranormal investigators, we all know this ourselves there, but should paranormal investigators steer away from ghost hunting um, equipment sites? Although I do know one that is Andy Guy, as you mentioned from Sky, that got a equipment from him recently there, but it's something which was worth getting. You know.
So the best part about this is why I would always endorse GhostÉire is Andy's Andy's brilliant. When you're on investigation, he's got his backpack, he's got his data loggers, he's sorted, he's got his little wristbands you can push when something not seemingly anomalous happens, just tap the button. Fantastic, great. Um, but he's doing that and then he's correlating that data. And when he gets like an anomalous situation, and then like, I don't know, the air pressure is at this level. And
Mm,
actually, every time we have that, the air pressure is at this level. So he builds his kit based on that finding, and then it's really cheap, his equipment. His
mm,
big thing is to get that data back, give it back to teams. You go do what you want, you tell me what you find, and then I'll refine that if I need to, or scrap it completely. And I love that process. It's not about pummeling 50,000 units out there, sell all the time. He wants these teams to take them out, and he wants those teams to come back to him and say, this isn't good
mm.
or that is. Um, and I think that's the big difference to it, is when someone's like that, they need supporting in the paranormal field. If you get a
Definitely.
company that is I don't know, drafting in £10 EMF meters off of eBay, selling them for 50 quid on their website, you know, that's a lot more monetary based. Business is business. It is what it is. People will make business out of anything. Do what you do. That's not a problem. I'm not gullible enough to buy it, but people are, and if they do.
Mm.
It is what it is. Um, but like you said earlier about like Timu and all that kind of thing,
Yes, I was going to ask you that now. Your
they're
telepathy, you knew that, Glad.
yeah, they are putting, it's the same quality stuff as the cheap stuff you buy on eBay and the cheap stuff you buy on Amazon. It's just brought in by someone who sells it on for more money. So you just got to wait a bit longer for it. Um, and
Mm,
we look at things like cat balls, mildly genius in the way of really expensive equipment out there, and because this is what we do as human beings, we want to go with the cheaper stuff. And
mm,
basically, a cat ball is mildly genius. It's fucking stupid, like the cat ball,
mm,
but it's also mildly genius. And it's a little motion sensor with a little tilt switch in it. And I made a small video about it because I just pull one apart and take a look at it and how it works and how to set it off. And then I come to the same conclusion as I do with the EVP, is I put it on a sponge. So I pull a
mm,
little bit of the sponge out, I sit it in
mm,
there, I have the switch facing upwards, so the tilt switch is like as level as it can be. And then any vibration that would set it off is gone, but if something touches it, it works. So it's a little
mm,
control on a really cheapy, tacky bit of equipment,
mm.
but it works as for what it needs to. It's no different than, you know, back in the Harry Bryce days. That
Yeah.
simplicity.
Has there been any tests with cat balls? I would say that because you mentioned, yeah, putting it on a sponge for the ground vibration.
Mm.
Um, but to do with sound vibration, would it be
Um,
sensitive to that as
I'm
well? Because
Yeah, it is.
especially using a condensed room, put into a
Hmm.
corner of a room is
Yep.
more likely to pick up the hertz, the vibrations of sound. So
Yep.
if it was in a noisy, would you agree with
And
that?
yeah, because when I was sort of playing about an experiment with one, like it my voice, I've got quite a bassy voice.
Mm,
And because of my bassy voice, I could set it off as I'm talking, and it's like,
mm.
wow. And it is just that
Yeah,
vibration. And all it is because
yeah.
it just shakes the tilt switch and the tilt switch falls, So it
Mm,
shakes it, it's like, okay, and then once it moves a bit, it does it again. So it's like that vibration aspect. If you're in a big open room, that echo is enough as well to kind of affect it.
mm,
At the same time, if you're in a really closed up room, you got someone with my kind of voice, it's
mm,
it's going to set it off. So if someone's
mm.
calling out and
Yeah,
you talk to the spirit of whoever, and then suddenly it starts going off, and then exactly
yeah,
everyone's like,
yeah.
"Wow, oh my god!" And it's like it's just the fact they've called out.
They've all gone up. Yeah, I know,
Exactly.
yeah. Oh, chaos. I'm just going to touch on this. Come to your question there, Caroline. There, statement there. Um, Paranormal shows like Help My House is Haunted, Ghost Adventures, Ghost Hunters as well. They've been prone to it. Have they made paranormal investigators probably just say yes to the stupid?
Um,
And with the use of the equipment they
so
use.
so yes would be my initial. Um, but again, that advantage of it was bringing individuals into the field who did advance more and did realize pretty quickly it was shit. And like a lot of people still follow their methods, and some of their methods are good. Some of the methods, say work. There's not really any that work. And most haunted, wink.
I
So
won't mention Most Haunted because Most Haunted was probably one of the. It was the best. It was a great show when it came out there. It was great, and
you mean
I know
when
it's
Kieran was
happened
in there?
when Kieran was in there, and then it went all as well. Yeah, no, but so, as you say, go on, carry on, Kev.
Yeah. So I think like there's some methods in there which are really good to experiment with. Um, some methods that are probably quite good if you gain any data from it. But with any TV show, any kind of component where they are doing investigations, and as you know, the reality is there's not much happening on these investigations, and you can go to 16 locations, and two of them something strange and worthy happens, and the rest is absolutely nothing. There's going to become pressure as series move
Mm,
on, and people want more. They want all different stuff to happen, so they begin to just branch out and grasp at anything they can, and then they begin to get ridiculous, and then they begin to fall out of favor with the public, and they begin to like so that same aspect that happens. But
mm,
what I will say is that doesn't make a lot of people go at TV investigators as rubbish investigators and blah 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 blah. Not necessarily. They are, from what they do outside of that contract that they signed to say that's what they've got to do. They might
mm,
be a really good investigator, like Jason Hawes. He is a great investigator, but he's on a TV show. They need results. He's kind of
mm,
doing his job. Um, and I think for me, as long as people understand that, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. And as long as
mm.
those people come out of the TV show and go, "Hey, this is the proper way to do things," then happy days. But again, depends what you sign.
Yes. Just to come out, a few more comments there. I think it was Karen there. No, so Caroline says, back to Andy there. I think she said Andy is an incredible
Mm.
asset to investigations. He came on board with our long term investigation of our home. Yeah,
Hmm.
Andy's he's great there. Kieran mentioned about Most Haunted there. I never heard of it actually there, Kieran. I'm only joking, I'm messing there. Carol says, although dressed in my running gear, you stopped me now painting. I thought you said panting in the bathroom. Painting, painting the bathroom. Thanks. Well, that's like it's a good exercise as well as painting the bathroom. There, what cut are you doing it red? I don't know, Cal. Paint it red there. It's more relaxing red. More relaxing. Uh, so I was going to say, so I'm going to quickly run through a couple of pieces of equipment there before
Hmm.
we come to any more questions or tie it up there. Uh, we mentioned cat balls, SLS camera, good or bad?
So, bad, and really I think it comes more down to the software. It's designed to pick up on a person, and that's what people are trying to do while they're sat there with the camera, and it's using lidar, and it's got its grid, and it's picking up on that distance, this distance, and that thing, and it's designed to go, that seems like an arm, that seems like a leg, and then it's like, okay, we'll
Mm,
just connect the dots because it makes it more efficient. And then people come out and go, well, we've got the right software. So, well, everyone obviously has. But again, it's still looking for, um, a human figure. And it still will connect the dots between two and try and make it. So it gives a lot of false readings. And also at the same time, people pick them up and walk around with them. Yeah, look at that
mm,
over there. Look at, and in that movement, the software is just going nuts. That lidar
mm.
is doing this the whole time,
Yeah,
and it's just giving
yeah.
false readings. Oh my God, did you see someone just like someone just appeared next to you in a thing? And you're like, no, you know, set one up. Anyone who's got one. Personally, I don't own one because I don't see the point. Anyone who's got one, do a little video of loads of different objects and just put them one by one, empty space, just put them one by one into that empty space and see what that software does. See what it shows up as. And then you'll see that it's pretty much a waste of money. Now, I'm not saying the LiDAR technology isn't a waste of money, but I think the
Mm,
software, if you're a software engineer out there and you want to kind of think of a better way to do it, I would be looking at using it just as a 3D mapping aspect, and
Yes.
be like,
Yes.
as a 3D mapping, you've got a decent camera on there, you've got a LiDAR sensor, everything else, and you could set it in a position, and you could set the software to do a 3D map for you, and then you've got your 3D aspect of the room,
Yeah, we
basically.
mentioned we were talking about Polycam, the LiDAR latest innovation
Hmm.
to for construction workers that they can see the layout
Yeah.
of a room and put the exact
It's-
measurements there. You know,
yeah, I used to
but
be a
as you said,
surveyor, so
I'm
back in
just
the
saying,
day.
like, if would you suggest, because we've got all these lights from the radar, structured lights there, if it's supposedly a 3D figure, shouldn't we be coming at three different angles, at stationary, static, three cameras, static at three different angles if it's a 3D figure? If it's
Technically,
three dimensional, yeah,
yeah. So
yeah,
if you had multiple cameras in one, but then what you've also kind of got to be aware of is that LiDAR is how that's interacting with the next one. It's a bit like if you put an
that's it. Yeah,
infrared sensor and an infrared sensor and they're facing each other, they
mm,
just glare at each other. So that'll be
true.
the idea of giving those misreadings.
Yeah, there would
But
be a lot of
but
that as well.
you could maybe set up a partition screen. This is just my engineering brain giggling now. Like, could set up a partition screen in the middle, and a bit of a
Mm.
cross, and so that there is that space where the center happens, and if something happens to walk through that, you'd gain the 3D image coming through. Um, but again, that's me just going off on engineering brain.
Yes, it's great. It's great. That Carl says goes back to painting ghostly white, and Trevor says you might win a few bob for new brushes. Yeah, that's Carl. Yeah, you might win some euro. I don't know in a second there. So finally, I suppose the main thing I'm going to ask you there, Kev, what should we bring on on paranormal investigations?
Um, Number one, notepad and pen, as I said, all day, every day, and in that you write down the environment. You write down, that there's this type of heating, there's all sorts of things. I've got like on mine, this is mine from my workshop, and inside I have little lists ugh, of what to look for. And
Hmm.
what if I'm going through it, I'm like, right, I just need to be like my personal emotional awareness, what I need to take into account, what plumbing and heating, windows, flooring, ceilings and walls. Um, Ventilation systems, lighting, environmental factors, any outside interference, like all of that, and I get it down on paper. Um, and that way I know the environment and I've sat in it. So that's just from using a notepad and pen. And that's really given me most of the information I need. Now, if you're dealing with things like poltergeist activity, then have a boat level, like a spirit level, just in the boot or in your bag, whichever one you want it. You want a camera, and in all fairness, most phones pretty much do that. Um, if you don't want to use EMF meters, phones become the best friend because
Hmm.
you don't have to worry about a lot of things because of them. Um, and
A
then,
compass. A
you know,
compass is an old
uh,
item, isn't it, for magnetic field?
yeah, exactly. So it's like you could utilize a compass to go, okay, let's see if that can be manipulated. But again, that would then become an individual experiment. So
Hmm. True.
what you're checking for is the rational answer first, then you can start to, oh, do you know what? I'm going to develop an experiment to see if a poltergeist spirit, whatever it is, can move the needle on this compass. And I'll turn the compass to prove that it can be moved, be filming that at the same time. And then my way of kind of asking that to happen is I'm going to ask for it to happen on demand. Okay. So you're going to like, how are you going to do that? I'm going to utilize 10 questions. Dun, 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 dun. And I'm going to perform that experiment 5 times. Okay, great. Let's try it. Dun, 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 dun. Huh. It didn't move. Okay. Results of that experiment, it didn't move. Okay, great. Now I'm going to try it again. I'm going to just try a different set of questions. Okay. Da-da-da. Did it move? Actually, yes, it did. Okay, why did that move then? Okay, I'm going to now build another experiment that's checking those questions as to why it happened only on that question. And just keep going and going and going, until you either go, nah, it's just random and it is what it is,
Hmm.
or actually, what's really strange is we ask these questions, then something's actually happening. So that'll be an individual sort of setup. But yeah, as long as you've got a camera, as long as you can a phone that has your voice recorder on it, as well. So you could do EVP sessions for 1 minute bursts on your phone. Um, so that's like simple enough. You got a camera, you got video, all that lot. All have those things separate. It's up to you. When I do my workshop, the tools, the equipment that I give to people is a camera, night vision, and normal. It's a voice recorder and a standard EMF meter, and we
Mm,
build experiments after we've learned everything about the environment, everything else. Then we build experiments to go through
mm,
that process. And that's why it's called the beginner's guide, because the basic things that we use and the basic tools that come with it.
mm,
And you also get free notepad and pen, because I think everyone should use them. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. And a lot of people go, I got 50 cameras, static cameras set up all over the thing. And it's like, you know, you don't need any of that. But I will say, if you get bored easy, that's the only way to describe it, and nothing's happening, which it tends not to, and you want to use an MF1, or you want to use a REM pod, make an experiment of it. When you still got your notepad,
mm,
make an experiment of it. Okay, I'm gonna use it, and then we're gonna see what happens, and I'm gonna log what happens and be like, oh, that was interesting, and then try and find an explanation for it to give yourself something to do if nothing's
mm.
happening. But don't go in there and be like, right, set up 5 REM pods across the thing. Blah, blah, blah. The one in the hallway just went off. Why? Because of a ghost. No, we don't know, because we haven't looked at the environment in there, and we don't realize that actually it's next to the Wi-Fi box that the owner installed last week.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's that
Co-
aspect.
Common sense, and as well, it's just basic as well, as he said. Like,
Mm.
it's
And
those little things there. Carl says, take a parapsychologist. They hardly
100%,
go anymore. They need
if
to
you
get
want to
out
come,
more.
you can come.
Definitely, definitely there. Yeah, we do. It's a great to have a parapsychologist there as debunkers. I tried to get a hold of debunker, but they won't come back to me. I don't know why, but maybe it's because I'm over here in Ireland though as well. I'll go
Yeah,
back to you there, Kev, in a minute, and ask you what you got planned coming up in the future, where people can contact you. But Cal, this is the moment of truth. This is your chance, and you might help Kev here on this one. There, you
never
picked
know.
the numbers. You picked the numbers 3, 6, and 12. So we're going to go through the astral travel. You should know this there, an out of body experience there, Cal. Let's see how you get on. Here we go. Oh, Cal, you picked number 3.
I've gone really blurry.
Yeah, let's see how we get on now. Oh, you've entered Kev. Kev, you're in the Halloween mega draw. Well done, Kev. You haven't even done
That's it.
anything.
Thanks,
Well
Dad.
done, Cal. So you're in the Halloween mega draw there now. So well
I'll
done.
split. I'll split it with you, Cal, whatever it is.
And now there's another opportunity for you to go in as well, Kev. Cal picked number 6 for the next box. Number 6, let's see. Number 6. So Kev's name is already in the Halloween mega draw. Oh no! Damn it! It's game over. Oh bloody hell! Ah, damn it! Ah, Jesus! The chance to win €20 there. But anyway, we'll go on to see what would have been number 12. So the top prize would have been €40. Major €40, which is about £2 sterling. I think, I don't know. So I don't know exchange rate now, but we're going for number 12. What would have that been? Oh, you would have won the top prize. Damn it. Ah, Jesus. €40. Oh, damn it. But anyway, well done, Carl. You put Kev in the Halloween Mega Draw. You're the first one there, Kev. And thank you, Carl, for participating. And well done, Kev, for doing absolutely nothing but being a guest tonight. Well done.
Winner.
Well done there. You're a winner. You might be the only one in it for Halloween. We'll see there.
Perfect.
Carl says, good man, Kev. So,
Yeah, I do 50, but
what do
50%.
50%. Kev, can you tell us where people can find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook. I'm on the usual social media outlets. A lot of what I do now is basically on social media. I also do the Beginner's Guide to Paranormal Investigation, which is basically a workshop doing the basics of paranormal investigation. So even if you've been doing it 20 years, book yourself onto one, because in the last 3 sessions, people who have been there 20 years, people who've been doing it for 10 weeks have all come away massively from it with lots of new information and a way forward. If you're bored of investigation, you don't really know a way forward, come along. The next one is, I believe, the 8th of November in the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre in Inkley. And yeah, went there the other day to just have a bit of a nose, and it looks like it could be a really fun place to do it as well. So yeah, that's big.
It's great. Yeah, so I'll just leave that up there. People, if you, this is a great way of learning more, and it's great to have you on the show there, Kev. There, and really appreciate it. It's great to have you with your knowledge there.
No,
For the
thanks for
next
having me.
show, we are excited to announce we will be speaking to paranormal and cryptid witness and investigator Deborah Hotswell from BBR. Topics will be the wood grouse, Dogman werewolf, and missing person research. So that's very interesting there. Thank you for everybody that participated tonight. Thank you, Kev. It's been brilliant. Appreciated to
No
chat to
problem.
you there. And I hope to see you in person in the near future there as well.
Hmm.
So, everyone, hope you're having a fine Wednesday evening. We won't see you next time. We'll see you in the near distance. Goodbye for now, folks. Just wave, Kev. It's Kev Kerr and Anthony Kerr again. Bye.